Hi, everybody. So we are here to talk about the first in our classics series. We are going to be talking about Lawrence of Arabia, and I'm joined here by my friend Christine. Do you want to say hi?
Hi. Yeah, hey everybody.
Yeah, and I have the live chat open, and I thought I'd just really quick explain kind of what we're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks. There is a theater chain by my house that is doing a classics silver screen series, and if you are in Utah, the Megaplex series, there's only $10 for the whole series, which is just crazy. And I'm gonna try. I've never shared a screen share, but I'm gonna try to do this. Can you see that,
I
Christine?
can see it.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
great. Yay, it worked. Okay. So this is, okay, let's present it to everyone. Okay, good. All right, I'm learning. So I'm sharing this with everyone that this is the series that we're going to be doing every week, and there may be weeks where we end up doing two in 1 week, or something like that. We just have to make it work between the two of us. But these are the series that they're doing, and it's going to be really fun. I'm excited to view all of these. And the first one, there's three of these that I have never seen before. And that is Lawrence of Arabia, and I have not seen Dr. Zhivago or Giant. So those three are going to be really fun, and a couple others I haven't seen in a long time. So I actually haven't seen Gone with the Wind in a long, long time, so that'll be fun. And so here, let me stop that sharing here. Okay, there we go. All right, I learned something new. So this is going to be really fun to talk about all these great classic films, and I wanted to state at the beginning that neither Christine or I are experts on this film by any stretch. We've both just seen it for the first time this week, so
Yep.
just,
Yep.
take any of our insight with that in mind. We're just sort of two friends talking about a movie and doing our best to kind of make sense of it. This is a very overwhelming film to talk about.
I agree.
And so please don't be too hard on us if we make a mistake here and there on it. So it looks like we do have a viewer. Yay! Tom Blakeney is watching. So yay!
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I look forward to any questions that you might have with what we're talking about. So I do have a lot of questions. But first I wanted to talk about just sort of our overall thoughts on the film. And I'll just start. My overall thoughts were it was pretty amazing. And I think what amazed me, because yes, it is an epic film, like your Ten Commandments or your Ben-Hur or something like that, which are amazing. But I thought the characters were so good for a epic film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Lawrence is just such an enigma. He's such a interesting character, and I also thought that, I mean, just all the there were so many characters that were interesting, and so I think it really separates itself from the typical sort of bombastic epic
Yes.
that I think now this would be a 10-part miniseries on Netflix, not a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just has, it's that kind of richness to it. And so I don't know, what were your sort of thoughts coming out of it?
Yeah, I would agree. It's truly epic, but yet it definitely set itself apart from things like the Ten Commandments, because it wasn't merely epic in scale, but I felt like it really focused in on especially T.E. Lawrence's personal experience. I felt like it got really intimately emotional with him, which is not something that you see in a lot of these epic, big classics. So I thought it was really unique in that sense.
Yeah. It really is. I agree. So yeah, this movie was released in 1962. Director David Lean, and it won Oscars for Best Picture, Director, Original Score, Cinematography, Art Direction, Film Editing, and Sound Mixing. So pretty good, pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And it was nominated for 10, which is a lot. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, well, let's get started because I do have a lot of questions. So we will. We want to get through as many of them as we can. If we do end up having to split this up into two, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We're going to try to get it to get done. This movie is a long movie, so there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. I did not do a summary like I typically do on these podcasts because it's just too much. Like I would be talking for forever. So we'll kind of summarize it kind of as I did these questions kind of in chronological order based on the film. And so I feel like we'll kind of give a summary through talking about it, if that makes sense. So my first question is, the movie starts out with the main characters saying Lawrence is an extraordinary man, a poet, a scholar, and a mighty warrior. He was also the most shameless exhibitionist since Barnum and Bailey. Does that play out in the film, in your opinion?
Okay, so you want me to answer this first?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. And not in the way that I expected, though, because with that setup, you hear showman and you think like, oh, he's going to be really big about himself. And even when I went online and read some of the articles, it was talking about how the movie makes him look like this huge narcissist. I did not see him that way in the film because I feel like propaganda, even propagating your own reputation, is actually a part of warfare. And I think that, and I think that his character understood that. Like, one of the best propagandists of all time was Genghis Khan. He was an expert at it. He would take chains of cities simply by and leaving a couple people to go run off and exaggerate everything that had just happened, and then everyone else would surrender. So for him to put himself up like that, I don't think that it was just him being like, I'm the greatest ever. I think that it showed an understanding of what it was that he was doing and the icon that he was creating out of himself. So that's the showman thing, which I think is the most controversial claim that they make there, because other than that, I mean, like, yes, he's a great warrior. Yes, he's a poet, because we see that play out. The poetry probably less so, but you can read about it in his history, and it's like, okay, but it's in keeping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he definitely was somebody who liked to. I think he liked the attention. He liked the. I think he actually. We'll talk a little more about him being a narcissist, but I think he was kind of a narcissist, but not necessarily in like a. I don't know, like a reality TV kind of way, like we see now, but just in the sense of he kind of enjoyed pain and enjoyed things being. I guess it's more masochist, but he enjoyed the chaos, I guess, and enjoyed kind of the thrill of the of I don't know, the thrill of defeat, if that makes sense. The thrill of he enjoyed the thrill of sort of leading people to a lost cause, a kind of a thing. I don't know if that makes sense. Kind of being a martyr in a way. He kind of he loved that kind of thing, and
the romanticism.
Yeah, that's good to describe it.
I hear it.
He was just a really interesting character. I think that it was such a smart way to kind of start this movie, because it really caught me off guard, because I'm expecting this like epic, and it started out kind of small, and it was really focusing on his character, and so that's kind of letting you know sort of where we're going to be going. That this movie is more than just a big bombastic kind of movie. That it is that there's actually more to it. I don't know, that it's actually about characters. So okay, so yeah, I agree. I thought it was a very interesting way to kind of start this movie. All right, so my next question is, the introduction of Sharif Ali is him killing a man. And what does that tell you about his character, and what did you think of him? And so Sharif Ali is he's the leader of sort of one tribe, and Lawrence meets him when he and his guide take water from a well. They're crossing this desert, and because he's going to visit Prince Faisal, and they're crossing this desert, and Sharif finds them, and this man who's the guide is from a different tribe, and Sharif kills him for drinking from his well. And so that sort of becomes our introduction to the character. He is played by Omar Sharif, and he ends up becoming part of half of this fragile alliance that Lawrence holds together between Sharif and then this other group, Arab group, led by a guy named Ada Abu Tayi, and who's played by Anthony Quinn. So he ends up being this kind of important character throughout the rest of this movie. I don't know. So what did you think about him and sort of our introduction? That's such a kind of a harsh way of kind of introducing a key character. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
Okay, my connectivity is super bad right now. I think it's because my kid is watching something. He's streaming.
Oh, okay.
So I might have to switch it if it persists.
Okay. So you didn't hear the question?
Now, it seems I did hear the question, or at least most of it. We were talking about how Ali kills all options ahead of time, so it was kind of like, what does this say about his character?
Yeah.
Was there more to it?
Yeah, no, that's basically it. I was just explaining that he becomes half of this sort of fragile alliance that Lawrence kind of keeps together of the Arab people for the revolt.
Yes. Is there like a way to like narrow that down into a more specific question?
Okay. Well, here, I'll show you guys a picture of him. So you get to see this.
By the way, Omar Sharif is like my favorite thing about this whole movie.
He is amazing in it.
He's the best. Oh, I love him.
Like, I don't know how. I mean, I'd like to see who won over him for Best Supporting Actor that year, because it's hard to imagine that he could be better than Omar Sharif in this movie. So I don't know. What do you think? That's just such a unusual way to introduce a character, to have him murder somebody. I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I want to stay out of saying anything like overly political here. I think that one thing that American idealists honestly get shocked by a lot is that things don't work the way you think that they work. And you go to these other countries.
Oh man, can't hear you. Darn it.
and you know you're not allowed to drink that well, and you drink it that well anyway, like, you're dead. That's the law, you know, like, that's how it works. So I saw it kind of as like a world building thing, even more than a character, because this character is.
Oh man, I keep losing you for long stretches. Darn it.
Our video is not working because you're watching this one. Can you watch Power Rangers instead, please? Because we can't be using the internet at the same time, okay?
That shouldn't make a difference. That's so weird. I've never heard of that making a difference before, but thanks everybody for your patience. Sorry about this.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
No, I that's so weird. I've never heard of something like that. Stop, you know, like being that sensitive to the feed. But anyway, we'll just so
it might not even make a difference.
Yeah, we'll just do the best we can. Yeah, it looks like Ed Begley won for Sweet Bird of Youth, whatever that is.
Oh no.
Well, let's try again. Try one more time to kind of.
It's always funny when that happens. Like, you look back in history and with, you know, with your.
Yeah, I guess it does have Paul Newman in it. But yeah.
So was my response understandable, or was it broken
I got the tail end of it, where you were saying about how you know the rules of drinking from the well, and how it's hard for us to understand, but you know, that was the rules of the day kind of thing, I think is what you were saying. Right? No?
This connectivity is still.
Yeah, it's still a problem. Darn it.
Fix it.
Maybe we need to try again another time. I don't know.
Maybe.
What we can do.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how bad it gets. But yeah, it kind of reminded me of a story that I read about some journalists in the Sudan. And I am a terrible person for not remembering the name of the journalist, because he's quite famous. And I think his last name might have been Carter. But there was a story about these journalists who wanted to like record what was happening in the Sudan, and they were chronicling some of the atrocities. I think it was in the 70s, and they were caught by some insurgents and pulled out of their car, and they started like begging for their lives. And one of these Sudanese folks said to him, like, "You're not in America, you're in Sudan," and they were killed. I think that that's kind of this prevailing attitude that we have a lot of the time. Like, we'll get involved in these things that are so huge and so much bigger than us or our understanding, and it kind of blows our minds. And so I see that kind of happening to this character, where like he goes to this place, although apparently, you know, he had been there before, but he gets involved in this war that is totally over his head, and over his understanding. And this is the introduction. It was very, very shocking for him. So I guess that's kind of how I took it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, it is a shocking way to start out your film, but I think it just is. It just kind of lets you know this is not just going to be your typical story. That you know, that this is going to be I don't know, it's going to be a journey for these characters, and that this is, like you're saying, a different place, a different different culture, and yeah, I think you see a huge growth in his character through the course of the movie, to the end where he's trying to kind of learn how to be more Western in his reading, and in his trying to learn how to be a politician, where he starts out just, he's not interested in discussing with this person. He's going to shoot him. He's going to kill him. And then by the end, he's trying to learn to be a politician, which is quite the contrast. So
yes.
Really interesting to me. And he was I just thought excellent actor in it. Very, very good. So, okay. So my next question, okay. Anyway, sorry. Okay, my next question is the first desert. Let's see here. First desert crossing is the Nefud Desert to get to Aqaba. And
Aqaba?
Yeah, they're going to try to take it so that they, because nobody has like crossed this desert or something, so they're going to surprise them because they're prepared for an attack on the port, but they're not prepared for an inland attack. And so they're crossing this desert, and one of the sort of big early scenes or sequences is Lawrence goes after, there's this man named Gassim who falls off of his horse, because they are going through the night, like they are not getting any sleep. This one, he falls off his not his horse, his camel, and Lawrence defies Sharif Ali and says, nope, I'm going to go and find this man who's fallen off this camel. I'm going to go. And he goes after Gassim. And I don't know, did you buy that character at that time would do that? Why do you think he did take that risk?
I think, again, it's not an American morality. I think it's an American sense of showboating, where, these guys were like, this guy's dead. Like, he fell off his camel. We don't know where he went. He's behind. The sun's coming up. Like, you don't have time. And he's just like, no, like, I'm going to be a hero. And the interesting thing is I read online that, like, that really happened, that he went back for somebody and they told him not to. But in real life, when he came back, they weren't like, oh, you're our favorite now, like, you're one of us. When he came back, they made fun of him, and they were like, that was seriously stupid. Like, that's not how it works. Again, that's not how the real world works. So, I mean, I think that it was altruistic, but he was ignorant, although, I mean, I think it's good that, like, he survived, and that's amazing that he survived, but I can definitely understand their perspective too, where they're like, no, if you go back, you're both just going to die, because in all likelihood, that was what was most likely what was going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was really interesting because it shows this, like, immediate loyalty that he feels and that he has with people, which I thought was actually a really likable kind of character, but it definitely also shows that little bit of egoism, that little bit of that he kind of thinks almost that he's like a superhero in a way, that he doesn't have to, like, follow the rules, and he like he can defy nature. And defy a desert, and
it's a sense of immortality.
Yeah,
for sure. So I bet those guys, when he came back alive, I bet they were just like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah. And yeah, the movie does such a great job of, like, making you kind of feel the heat and feel the desert, and you just think, oh my gosh, this guy is insane, like, but it really does work. And so, okay, so my next question is, Sharif Ali gives Lawrence the Arab robes after, I'm sure there's a name for it, but I don't know, after rescuing Gassim. Why do you think they make this change of clothing, and what does it symbolize for the character in the story?
Well, in the context of the movie, I think they were just showing like this was where he was accepted as one of them. Clothing is so much of your culture. And so, and I thought it was really interesting too, how reluctant he was to shed their garb for his uniform again. When everybody was like, when he came back and they're like, hey, where's your uniform? And he's like, oh, it got lost. Like, he doesn't want to get back into it.
Yeah. It's only later on when he kind of is kind of ashamed of himself that he really gets kind of wears he kind of abandons it,
Yeah.
It's a good point. Very good point. I mean, I thought it was kind of it's sort of his being accepted into sort of this brotherhood of this, and also I think the fact that his was the white one, his was the one that just sort of, it was almost like they were crowning him king at a certain point, because the others, like Omar, I mean, Sharif Ali's is in black most of the time, and the other, Ada, his was in blue, I think, most of the time. So I don't know. I just think there was kind of something there that he had done the hero's quest kind of a thing. So yeah, okay. So the next question I have is what did you think of Ada Abu Tayi and how he is persuaded to join with Sharif Ali's men against the Turks, with Lawrence being the glue that held them together? So he's the other side of this group of the Arab revolt, and he's played by Anthony Quinn, who is a really interesting actor because he could play like any culture, like he he's Italian in some movies. He's I think he actually is of Italian things, but he's Jewish in some movies. He's just whatever they somehow. It seems to work pretty well. But anyway, yeah. What did you think of that? Because he also starts wanting to kill him because they're drinking from his well, and then he realizes, oh, I'm outnumbered by these guys. And so then he ends up joining with them and becoming this sort of third part of this revolt throughout the rest of the movie. And here, I'll share a picture of him too while you're talking.
Yeah, this one might be one of my most disappointing answers, because even when I read the question, I was like, oh, I wasn't following enough of the politics during the movie to like even really have a good grasp on what everybody was doing, what everybody was, that was happening. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really have like a clear thought on him. For me, he didn't impact me as much as some of the other characters. So I guess I didn't think a whole lot about him during the movie.
That's okay. Let's see here. I'm just gonna share a picture with everybody here.
By the way, was his nose fake? Like, was that a fake nose?
I don't know.
Because the whole movie, the makeup on his nose was a different color than the rest of his face. And I kept staring at it, and I was like, I don't understand. I didn't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he's somebody who is more of a sort of a traditionalist. He is somebody who he doesn't want anybody taking his picture. He believes that is kind of evil or promoting evil, and things like that make him, I thought, an interesting character. And he yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because Sharif Ali is also a traditionalist in a certain way, but I feel like Sharif Ali was a little more of a realist. But he also, I mean, this character is interesting because, well, both Sharif Ali and his name's hard for me to remember, but Ada Abu, that he's the one. I guess he's a realist in a way too, because he's also the one who, when they loot, that he says, like, look, this is my payment, this is my deal.
Yeah.
And so in a way, I guess Sharif Ali is sort of more the idealist because, but he's also kind of honest about that as well. But like when they're sort of buying armies and things like that, I think by the time, in a lot of ways, I think Lawrence kind of becomes more and more like both Sharif Ali and Adu Abu Tayi throughout the course of the movie. And so it's just an interesting character, and somebody who's not one note like I think they would end up doing today.
Yeah, I did think that scene was really interesting where they were discussing the photo taking, because when Lawrence explains it, he doesn't say it like Adi Abu is wrong. He just says, like, he thinks that if you take his picture, it will take away a portion of his virtue. And then the photographer's like, well, can I take your picture? And he's like, yeah, I don't care. And I almost saw that less as him being like, oh yeah, because I'm not into that superstition, as more of him being like, I no longer have dignity. I no longer have virtue. So it doesn't even matter. Yeah. Which, I think was really interesting. Yeah,
definitely. I thought that too, that he's finally kind of embraced, I guess, he's embraced it. Like, he starts out with being such an idealist with Lawrence, going after this man who he doesn't even really know, falling off the camel, risking his life for somebody like that, and he becomes sort of more cynical, I guess is the word, through the course of the film.
I think it's one of those situations where, like, you go out thinking that you're going to be a hero and you end up realizing that you're actually a pawn.
Yeah.
That's kind of his arc, is, that he's excited and adventurous, and he's like, oh, it'll be fun. And then he goes, and it's like, even as a showman, it's kind of like a Katniss Everdeen moment where he's like on top of the train, and he's like making an icon of himself, but he knows it. Like, he knows he's being cheap in order to achieve his means. And it's like, that's where he's sold himself, but he's accepted the fact that he's just going to be a pawn in someone else's game, and there's nothing that he can do about it anymore.
Definitely. Okay, so speaking of that, the big kind of moment where he changes, I think, the most is when he has to execute Gazim, the man he has saved. And Lawrence says later on to, I think it's Colonel Appleby, I forget all the people's names. Anyway, to one of the colonels, he says, I killed 2 men and I enjoyed it. And one of them was this execution of Gazim that he has to do. And I don't know, what did you think of that? What did you think of that scene?
I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was interesting to compare it to the actual accounts, and then to think about why they would choose to portray it the way they did in the movie, and how I think actually both of them are right. A lot of people said, like, in real life, like, they actually interviewed a guy who was present for that execution, who said, like, after he did this, he went off and, like, curled up in a little corner next to a rock and cried. And Peter O'Toole, in an interview, said, I wanted to show the strength of emotion, where even if they don't see that scene, it's like your heart goes there. Like, he wanted to show impact, even if it wasn't the same conclusion. So them saying that he enjoyed it, or his character saying that he enjoyed it, I think is really interesting. And even if someone's like, oh no, he went in a corner and cried, like, that doesn't mean that you didn't feel an adrenaline rush from doing that. And like,
that's true.
Yeah. And for me, like, there are some things that are clearly good and there are some things that are clearly bad, but most things are interesting. And the strength of how interesting things are to me carries a lot of weight, like, in my in my decision making in my life. And I think that that's just like a personality type. And I think that this character had a similar personality type where like he craved for his life to be interesting, and killing someone as like terrible and horrible as it would be, you can't beat how interesting that is.
Yeah.
It would be so impactful. And for someone who like thirsts for that, you can see them feeling like incredibly conflicted.
Well, and what was really cool too is there was almost no melodrama in it, in the sense that when he said that to the colonel, I was like, oh, whoa. Like, it's not like you had some like wicked laugh from him or something like that. It was just like he did it, and then you find out later that he enjoyed it. Like, and you're kind of looking into his eyes, which, I mean, Peter O'Toole's eyes in this movie, it's like, whoa. But I thought that made it even more interesting that we're, as viewers, that, you know, we're not sort of like, we don't get some kind of maniacal kind of laugh or anything. He was just sort of like, wow, okay,
Right.
this is interesting. And you know, you felt bad for him that he would have to do this after what he had gone through to save this man. And you know, it's sort of like,
Yes.
I feel like it kind of like all of humanity in Lawrence's eyes sort of took a hit with that moment.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and he was just never quite the same, which I don't know how you could be the same after you've, you know, killed a person. That's got to change you forever. It's got to.
Well, and I think with any war movie, that is probably one of the most crucial moments, is like what it actually means to kill someone, because we like to see war in this like huge, grand, epic scale where it's like, here are the good guys and here are the bad guys, and then they're just going to fight each other, and you're going to have 100 people die on screen all at once, and it's not even going to phase you. And so for them to go to this moment, you know, that was a real moment in his life, and to say like, here's the impact that actually killing someone would have on you. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's really amazing.
Yeah. Well, so my next question is kind of related. I said, is Lawrence a masochist? He says there's a scene where they're lighting their matches for their cigarettes, and he extinguishes the match with his hands. And they say, doesn't that hurts? How do you do that? And he says the trick is not how do you make it not hurt? He says the trick is not minding the hurt, something to that effect. He says, and so, which is interesting kind of thing, that, you know, we're talking about him kind of getting some kind of sort of adrenaline from killing a man. In a way, we see him as in several scenes kind of getting getting sort of an exhilaration from kind of pain and suffering in a way. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I did not see it as a masochist moment. I saw it as a moment of acceptance. It kind of reminds me of like, I'm the nerd in the audience who, like, after any kind of really interesting show, I'll always try to talk to the performers afterward. And I have asked many performers who do like painful looking things, like if it hurts or not. And every single time I ask, like, I've asked fire breathers, I've asked Hawaiian fire dancers. I've asked silk aerialist who would like slide down these silks. She'd like grip the silks and slide down on her hands. You know, I've asked like, does that hurt? Or do you have calluses? Like, do you not even feel it? And every single one was like, no, I feel it every single time. And like, you know, these fire dancers too, they were like, I burn myself every show, but you just stop caring that you got burned because this is what you do. So for me, I guess because it reminded me of that, I didn't connect it to masochism. I connected it to performers and workers who are like so passionate about what it is that they're doing that everything else is totally inconsequential. It's like, of course it causes pain. That's why it looks so awesome.
Right. Interesting.
Like, this is why I'm special for doing it, you know? Because it sets them apart.
Right.
Because most people won't dare to do what they do because it hurts. Hang on just a second.
You're fine. It does definitely set him apart as this as this kind of character that is
because I'm recording a video.
Is going to it just sets him apart as this character who is different from everybody else, you know. And I think he's a little bit of a masochist. I think he I don't know. I think in the sense that he thinks that he's kind of stronger and better, and it kind of makes him feel good to do things that are hard for other people.
Yes.
You know, I think in that sense, he kind of is a little bit. But you know, you see him you see him through the course of the movie, kind of, in a way, kind of embrace that, and then in a way, kind of become more fragile, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah.
So,
yeah, this is a great movie on PTSD.
Yeah, yeah, it's very true. Okay, so what did you think of Lawrence's interaction with the various commanders, General Allenby, Prince Faisal, and Colonel Brighton, and other people like that? What did you think of sort of those scenes?
So this is the funniest thing to me. Like, I connected with Sharif Ali. I connected with Prince Faisal. I don't remember any of the British guys' names. I was like, they all.
Oh, we lost you. Darn it, we're doing so good. Shoot. Man.
Hi.
Hey.
I actually think I solved the problem. This is so embarrassing. I can't believe I didn't check this. I was on the wrong Wi-Fi.
Oh, okay.
So it should be better because now I'm on the right one.
Oh, yay. Oh, good. No problem. No problem. And yeah, I was just like, oh, I want to hear what she's saying. Darn it all. But yeah, I think that that the British guys are fairly interchangeable. That so I totally understand that kind of response. And I thought that it didn't really matter to me which one he was talking to, but I thought the scenes that I thought they were interesting scenes for his character.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that I saw like really happening there that I thought was represented well was like if you spend a long time in a foreign country, it changes you. And I read an article once that was really great, talking about how, like, you know, from one country you have people who are represented by squares, and in another country you have people who are represented by circles. And if you move from one to the other and you make bonds and connections and the culture becomes part of your personal culture, you're not a circle anymore, but you're also not a square. You're neither. And you're, in this article, it called him a triangle. And he was such a triangle. It was like he was not relating to his fellow soldiers at all. But he also, even though he could wear the Arab garb, he was not Arab. He was not truly one of them. He wasn't anybody. And so I felt like you really, really saw that when he'd go back and he'd be talking to these other, you know, British guys. And it's like he doesn't even know who he is. He's just this oddball.
I mean, what I thought was so great is the movie does not get bogged down in exposition about, you know, we've got to take this group here, we've got to go here, or here's the reasons why, and all of this stuff. Like it kind of just is the they're very succinct, they're to the point, and they're mostly just kind of the generals and corporals or whatever kind of saying like, you're crazy, I don't care. Like that's basically what it comes down to each of these sort of discussions. And so I thought it was really effective in that way, because it could totally have gotten kind of been a bunch of speechifying and a bunch of sort of technical, you know, stuff about the area and the region and stuff. But it really didn't. It really didn't. It kept it very simple, just enough to kind of get you to the next spot, just as sort of a transition to the next spot. I think that, you know, and it was interesting too, I felt like, because it was just like, I was never sure whether they were going to like court-martial him or like promote him. Like,
right?
I'm not like 100% sure. Like, this is a really interesting sort of character in that way. Like, I'm like, oh, they're making him a colonel. Okay. All right. You know, I don't know. It was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't know. He's like, there's this sort of guerrilla warfare, and there's some other things like, and they just can't, because of the results that he's gotten. Like they can't not do it.
Right.
But you tell they're kind of in a way doing under duress a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I thought was really interesting was how close these locations were. You know, and they were really separated by culture. Like, yes, they're technically separated by a desert, but it was just like blowing my mind when they were like, you know, oh, hey, like come back in a couple of days. And then he would just like go, and then he'd be in this, you know, British occupied territory. And then he would like go back and forth. And you imagine it, I mean, I imagine it, as like America, even though he wasn't in America, where like you got to take like massive plane flights to get to these places. But
that's true.
It wasn't, because Britain had colonized everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, because they could get to like Cairo in like 10 days or something like that, or, you know, stuff that did seem kind of like, oh, that seems really fast. Those camels are faster than you think. Yeah. But yeah, and it was also always kind of jarring when you'd see a car, because like when it was just the desert segments, it felt so old. Like it did feel almost like a Ben-Hur or something, like, which is, you know, way earlier. And so when I would see like a car, I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the 1900s. Anyway, so it was interesting that way. I felt. I think I was intentional too, to have it be kind of jarring. There's these two worlds that Lawrence is kind of living in. I think as the movie gets on, he just becomes kind of less equipped to sort of dealing with both worlds in a way. He's sort of a man without a country. Okay. All right, next question is, starting in part 2, so we actually finished part 1, which is kind of crazy, my part 1 questions. Starting in part 2, Jackson Bentley starts photographing Lawrence. Does he put up with this or love it? Ada thinks the camera will steal your virtue, that a photographer is a thief. And we talked a little bit about this, but do you have any kind of thing else to sort of say about that?
I think we covered it. I think I kind of talked about how I felt his response was to that. But it was a really interesting thing to include, though. I liked it. It was good texture for the story.
Tom says, those camels must be magical. Yeah, they really were pretty impressive. And it looked so uncomfortable. Whenever they sit on those camels, the way that they would have to kind of, I was always just like, oh man, I could not do that for hours and hours and hours. It looked awful. Yeah, I mean, I did think that the Bentley character, though, was kind of my only thing I would add is I thought he was kind of an interesting character, especially to throw in at the second half, you know, that he's also sort of another perspective. You've got the military perspective, you've got the Arab perspective, and you've got this sort of media perspective, which I thought was really, again, very interesting. and
Yes.
that he's gonna kind of puff up Lawrence even more, and he's part of the reason why Lawrence would get these promotions and things is because he created this sort of celebrity of it's almost like the equivalent of sort of a military blogger or something like that.
Yeah.
Back in the day, in a way, that people got really interested in. So it's I don't know, it's very, very cool. Okay, so then, so at the beginning of part 2, Lawrence starts a guerrilla warfare, attacking and looting the trains. General Allenby opposes this, saying they are thieves, but then Abu Tai thinks it is his payment. Who is right in this situation, in your eyes?
So for me, like I said, some things are right and some things are wrong, but I mean, that's the law of the land. Like, I don't think that there is any really good reason that we don't take things away from dead people. Like, I feel like it's a very sentimental viewpoint to not rob the dead. The fact that we have such strong views about like grave digging and things like that. I don't really know why we have those views. I mean, I hold them. I don't go grave digging on the weekends. But yeah, but for someone else to be like, no, I don't have that same amount of sentimentality. This guy is not using this stuff. And we are in a war, and it would be more amoral if I, from this like desert Bedouin tribe, was going to waste valuable resources in the name of like what, my own dignity or honor or whatever. Like, no, this is valuable stuff. Like, so I think that.
Well, and it's interesting because by the end, you do kind of devolve into a traditional sort of military conflict where you have paid soldiers fighting paid soldiers, where you start out with characters shooting people for using the well, and then you end up, and then this sort of second part. Now we have a train with civilians. They have luggage and stuff like that getting killed, and quite brutally, really. And then you have them taking their sort of stuff, and so I don't know. It's just sort of interesting that I think it kind of becomes sort of more. You can see why somebody like a General Allenby would be so sort of bothered by this kind of civilian kind of attack. It's just not something that is sort of normal, but because we start out the movie with sort of a murder, I think that it kind of we're sort of normalizing in a way sort of this behavior, if that makes sense. And it's just interesting.
Although I do think it is interesting that he wasn't like, hey, you shouldn't kill all those civilians. He was like, hey, you shouldn't steal their stuff after they're dead. Yeah, like, one of those things bothers me more than the other. So stealing stuff after they're dead, no, I don't see that as a very large issue. But
well, it's interesting too because
killing civilians,
I mean, because the Turks are kind of I mean, again, so little exposition about them. We really don't get to know them hardly at all. We just know that they went into I think it's Dhofar is what it's called later on, where they like just mass slaughter in Dhofar, and that's what later on, and but we really don't know. I don't know. It's just interesting because we don't know sort of the villain really that well, or the thing they're fighting against. It's all just about kind of the evolution of these characters, which is really good. Okay, so next, is Lawrence a white savior, or is the movie smarter than that? He says, "My friends who will walk on water with me." He says, "My friends who will walk on water with me." Does this movie purposely satire or take on the white savior complex? I don't know. What do you think about that?
In short, yes. He is a white savior. Just like he's a perfect example of it. The thing is, though, is tropes like that, and I think I might have talked about this before, and I'll probably talk about it again because it's something I feel like comes up a lot. When you have a movie that is so good like this, it creates tropes. And I don't feel like you can blame it for being the trope when it's like, this is what put it on the map. Like, we would not have the white savior trope movies that we do in the same amount that we do, that are literally like, you can just like, yeah, I think one of your other questions is like, do you see the influence of this movie on other movies because it was a favorite of other directors? It's like, yeah, you see it in so many ways. And I think one of the ways is this perpetuation of the white trope, or sorry, the white savior trope, because audiences responded to it. And I think that sometimes that's tempting for directors to go like, oh, well, we're going to assume that they didn't respond to the excellent writing or the excellent acting or the excellent music or the whole epicness of the thing. We're just going to take these like bare bones setups of this white man coming in and educating the natives, you know, of their own country and teaching them the ways of civilization. Like it gets repeated. So is he a white savior? Yes. Does it bother me in this movie? Actually, not a whole lot.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he technically is, but I felt like sometimes they were sort of satirizing that a little bit. I thought they were kind of poking fun at it a little bit.
Because he was self-aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that he is trying to kind of, I mean, I don't know, like, it also doesn't sort of aggrandize the native people, like say a Dance with the Wolves or a Pocahontas or something like that. You know, clearly you have them murdering, you know, at the very beginning, and it just sort of sets the tone for the whole kind of, that these characters are sort of complicated characters. And so I guess it would bother me more if I felt like he was preaching, or if I felt like he was kind of, if I felt like he was better person really than either of the two, and then Abu or Sharif Ali. I don't think he is at all. And if anything, I think Sharif Ali is probably the best person, as far as, which is interesting because he starts out as a murderer. So I don't think that, yes, he I don't know, it's just so interesting because like he starts out rescuing this man, and then he ends up executing him, and he ends up, so there's just not, it's hard to put these characters in a box like that and say that that they are sort of this one trope. They kind of defies tropes a little bit, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's definitely more complex than the trope often is, but it's all centered on him. And like, obviously he's the main character, but that's part of the point, is like Sharif Ali does do some really amazing things. So does Prince Faisal. And yet we're not given the same amount of humanity from them that we are with him. They're good characters, but they're absolutely supporting characters.
They're supporting characters, but I don't know if I agree about the humanity. I think we get, in some cases, more humanity from Sharif Ali than from Lawrence. I think that Lawrence can be kind of a little bit harder to understand, and I think that Sharif is sort of more the heart sometimes of the more we relate to. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, it's an interesting point. I think, yes, you have to kind of say that he does certainly fit that trope, but I don't know, I just feel like there's sort of more going on, and I do feel like there are some sort of winks at the trope in a way. Yes. You know, sort of even lines like saying that, like, anyone want to walk on water with me? Like, kind of, I yes. feel like that is sort of purposefully being like, we know, we get it, kind of.
Yes. Well, and I do agree. Like, there are some divergences for sure. I mean, like, the movie begins with his death. That doesn't happen in like Avatar. You know, most of these white savior tropes, it's a lot more cut and dry. Like, the guy kind of like comes in with his sheer awesomeness, and there's usually a native woman that loves him by the end of the movie, and he is like the master of the universe by the end of the movie. Like, you see that in Avatar. Like, he's like, I'm the best dragon bird writer ever, you know, and then he's like got his girlfriend and he's like one of them, and this is so different from that.
Yeah, because Lawrence isn't really one of them. Like, he is in the sense he's wearing the clothes and he loves them, but he he's like a man without a country in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, I feel like it's deeper than that. I feel like
Yes.
anybody who says, I'm not going to like this movie because of that, I feel like is selling the movie short. I think it's better written than that. I think it's better executed than that. I think I don't know. It's better than that. That's all to say.
I agree. Well, and the other thing too is like, I do believe that a lot of the stuff done here was done in ignorance of the time. And this movie on its own, it does not bother me. I feel like it's totally different now when you have groups of people that are extremely outspoken about their own representation, and Hollywood aggressively bypasses everything that people are asking for.
That's
like,
true.
That's a very different situation to me. So I really don't hold it against this movie.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, excuse me. So Bentley tells Sharif, "You answered without saying anything. That's politics." Do you agree or disagree with this? Because we think of politics as, you know, speechifying and talking a lot. So I think this is sort of interesting kind of commentary about, and without getting into personal views or anything. But do you think that's an accurate? You answered without saying anything.
I'm not really sure. Can I get your opinion first? Then
yeah, sure.
See what I think.
I think it's brilliant. I think that there are so many, in my opinion, I think that you look at something like education, just as an example, without getting too much into it, but like, we really just have the same ideas that just keep getting repackaged in new ways over and over and over again. And people say, oh, we're doing something new. Well, you're really not. You're just saying something without really saying anything at all. And because nobody, I mean, every once in a while you'll have something that truly does, you know, it's kind of a game changer, like you have like an Obamacare or something like that. But for the most part, it's just the same ideas that are packaged differently. And most of the big changes that we've had in our country in the last, I don't know, 50 years, let's say, have been through the courts, have not been through politicians. And so I think that's totally brilliant, and I completely agree with it. that the most true politicians are, you answer without really saying anything, and it's a rhetoric. Lot of sort of rhetoric. Yeah, that's a good word for it. So that's what I think.
Yeah. I'm just gonna have to agree with you. I think that's a really cool interpretation of that line. I think you're right. Yeah. I think that's where they're going with that.
All right. Yeah, it's a really well written script. I mean, I was just so impressed. There were so many quotes I could have pulled, you know, that were just so good. Like, this movie could have been so bombastic. It could have been so preachy. It could have been so, you know, full of caricatures. But it's not. Every time I thought that a character would say something, then they wouldn't, and they would say it differently. And I was just so impressed with so much of the dialogue. So, okay. In Daria, Lawrence is taken prisoner and whipped. Some say raped off screen. Some say that's implied. So how does this change Lawrence? And I don't know, I guess, what did you think of this scene? This scene?
Oh my gosh, I really felt for him. This was one of the things that I really enjoyed about this movie, was how often they just showed his face, and they just showed him thinking. He's not saying anything. He's not doing anything. He's just like sitting on a camel or sitting on a rock or whatever, and just sitting and thinking. And they did a lot after this, which I thought was just really, really powerful. I think that as a victim of it, not me personally, but like him as a victim of abuse, and I absolutely read it as rape. I don't think they would have included some of the stuff that they included with the villain if that wasn't where they were trying to go with it. I think that as a victim, what you're naturally going to do in a situation like that is you recede more into yourself, in order to find a safe place, and to kind of like, it's almost like you got to reprogram. And so for him to be shown just like processing, was really interesting to me, because before he's all like bravado and like, this is who I am and I'm a leader and everything, and then like this happens, and I wouldn't say that he's like completely broken, but I would say that there's this retreat, there's this emotional retreat that happens, then he's not the same.
I think so. I think the idealism is gone now. The man who went after the man who fell off the camel is gone, and we see a much more sort of realistic, almost bitter character kind of after this. And I don't know if it was just like he was finally sort of humbled in a way that that threw him, and that he could sort of talk his way out of. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty gut wrenching scene, I thought. Gut wrenching. I had to close my eyes, the whipping, like, oh man. Yeah. And you felt for him because you just feel that for anybody that's going through something so horrible. And I don't know, I could just see, like, the rest of the movie, he's much more sort of bitter character, I think, after that. And just weak. He becomes kind of weak and tired. He looks tired the rest of the movie.
I might say jaded.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay, so next is, there are no women in the film. Some have said Lawrence is a gay character. Do you agree or disagree, or does it not matter to you one way or another?
So as far as there being no women, like, obviously it doesn't pass the Bechdel test. But like, I did not care. And in some ways I was actually grateful for it, because they showed women a couple of times and they're all wearing like actual traditional garb. And I was like, hallelujah. Like, that
very
is
briefly, though. I mean, I don't think there are any women who have any lines.
Well, but what I'm saying hallelujah about is that they didn't have any belly dancers.
Oh, yeah.
Because that, you're going to like make me go nuts with that. That's inaccuracy that's so beyond anything that I can stand in a movie. Like, that's like, I think the number one indication that you have got like rampant Orientalism in your movie is if you have women wearing belly dancing outfits and that's presented as like historically accurate. Those outfits did not exist. That was not a thing. So at any point in time. And I won't go into that. I'm very passionate about that. But anyway, but as far as him being a homosexual character, I think it was really interesting reading about who it is that they're trying to represent, the actual T.E. Lawrence, because there's just speculation. I did read that the actual T.E. Lawrence did have a softer, more effeminate way of speaking that Peter O'Toole captured in his character, and I thought, well, that's really cool that they wanted to keep that. I even was watching a thing that was speculating that like he may not have been raped, but that was his way of filtering a homosexual encounter that he had, whether it was consensual or not. I thought it was interesting, but there's just no way to know.
Right.
As far as how important it is to the story, I think that if it's T.E. Lawrence, right? My brain just like questioned that. If T.E. Lawrence had written in his book, like, I'm attracted to men, or I had these relationships, and they took it out and did not present it in the movie, that would be wrong. I think that if he had desired to be represented in that way, they should have. But if he didn't include those things and it remained ambiguous in his personal history, then I think leaving it out is what people are right to do. I think that he should be remembered the way that he wanted to be. So
yeah, I mean, and we're talking this 1962. I mean, just as a practical matter, they're not going to have a gay character, like, so they, in a way, I think they kind of had to they did the best they could. And I mean, I think this is about as close as you could get in that day and age in a major blockbuster of having a character kind of with stereotypical sort of gay tendencies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was surprised that they suggested that he was raped. I didn't think that male rape was something that they would be too eager to
Yeah.
insinuate, on the screen at that time. I thought it was actually really, really,
Pretty bold, yeah.
yeah, pretty bold that they kept that in there. I'm glad they did, because that's a big deal. Like,
Yeah,
if that
of
happened
course.
to him, it's a big deal.
Yeah. And I don't know. I feel like I don't know if I guess I don't know how I feel about, like, I don't think it, I guess I don't think it really matters one way or another. I mean, because I was just glad that they didn't like shoehorn some romance into the story. I guess I think that is very good.
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
more my opinion, and I think that they don't. It's all handled in a subtle way that I think that makes his character richer. If you think of him as a gay character, I think maybe it even makes it even more interesting. Well, we've said that word a million times, but
well, I think that I think the movie kind of matches the descriptions of what we have about him, because it sounds like he was a somewhat ambiguous person. So I think wondering about it in the movie is really similar to kind of wondering about it if you were studying his personal history. Like,
exactly.
You're not really going to know. And again, like, I mean, if he had wanted to be remembered that way and it was erased, not cool, but that wasn't really what they did. This is the history that we know of him. So I think they were fine focusing on what they did.
Okay, yeah, I agree. All right, the next question I have. On the attack before Damascus, Sharif is worried the fighters know nothing of the Arab revolt, but Lawrence admits to buying them. These are not ordinary men. And he says, and then that Sharif says, and then Lawrence says, I do not want ordinary men. They then proceed to slaughter the Turks with Lawrence and his pistol out, and he's like, flinging his pistol, and then you see this scene and then with him with this bloody knife, and I guess Bentley, and then Bentley, they all kind of, after there's sort of the slaughter, Bentley just kind of walks around saying, Jesus wept, and Jesus wept. Jesus wept. And that's just what's so great about this movie, because you could have these sort of like speeches, where they're sort of telling you how to feel, but they don't do that. They just do something a little bit more sort of obscure and thought, making you kind of think, what's he saying there? Like, this is a newspaper man. He's not like he's a minister, or he's quoting scripture. Like, I don't know, it was just so good. I thought. But I don't know, what do you think of that, all of that?
I agree. There were so many times that this movie reminded me of a Miyazaki film.
Yeah. Oh, good one.
And it's
a good comparison.
And its allowance for you to sit and observe and think. And it's like you have so much more empathy for what's on the screen when you're given the time. And I don't want to like answer the questions that I know are coming
that
up.
Was kind of a lot of questions in one question, but like, what do you think of him, like, kind of deciding that the kind of men he needs are basically mercenaries, or he's going to pay them? Like, his character kind of coming to that point. Like, first of all, let's talk about that first, and then the second part, I guess. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think it's interesting. I don't think that I could say I completely understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could logically put it together, but for me, it's just kind of one of those things where it just represents like how complex culture is. Like, the idea that, these used to be people fighting for their rights and their freedom or their homeland, and it's personal to them. And then now it's like we get help from these, mercenaries, and it's not personal to them at all. Like, what did, I don't know. It's like kind of an open-ended question for me. It's like, what does it mean? Like, anyway, what are your thoughts?
I think that he just, if you look at it, if you think about him as being somebody who has just had kind of his humanity taken out of him, it makes sense that he would then look to people without sort of humanity in these mercenaries. Those would be, that he doesn't want ordinary men. He doesn't want humans. He wants, soldiers at this point. And I feel like the character has just been built up to kind of get to this point, and in such a, I don't know, perfect way.
You know what it kind of reminds me of is Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was sharing, just sort of this image of him with this knife, and just like you just feel this like devastation of like what has happened. He goes from being this sort of, it's like the reverse of the hero's journey in this movie. He starts out saving this man, and going out and being just horrified that Sharif Ali would kill his friend.
Yes.
And by the end, here he is with leading this band of mercenaries, and him with it's almost like Macbeth feeling, is sort of what I thought.
Yes.
Him with the bloody knife and I don't know, it's just really amazing. I thought just perfect. I really thought, and here you have, like, you start out the beginning of the movie with Sharif Ali being the one who's sort of cold and heartless, killing this man, and by the end, he's the one that's saying like, "Whoa, these people are not part of our cause. These people are not part of. This is not what kind of I signed up for."
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't think of this before, but hearing you talk about it, it reminded me of it, how in other parts of the world, because this is during World War I, like, battles looked very different. And one of the biggest things that happened during World War I was flesh and blood was going up against machinery. And that was one of the main things that caused the massive amount of death during World War I. And it was never the same. Like, after that, we started, pulling people back. We stopped throwing people at, oh my gosh, we stopped throwing people against weaponry like we did. But you bringing up the mercenaries and how, like, he didn't want men, he didn't want ordinary men, my brain kind of went like, he wants something more like a machine, where it's like you put the money into it, the violence comes out of it, and it's almost like an echo of pitting these, these humans or ordinary men against men that are not seen as human, that are seen as something else. So my brain is kind of like, oh.
It's really interesting. I mean, that's the great thing about this movie, is like, when you expect it to jab left, it jabs right. When you expect it to, like, it's just so well written. And I think having this newspaper man, who should be like the most cynical person of all, he's the one that's out there saying, Jesus wept. Like, he's horrified by this. And I don't know. I just think that's really moving. It's really moving and very, very, very poignant moment.
Yeah.
That even for a newspaper man, this is too much.
Yeah. When I was reading about it online, some people were saying this is the greatest war movie of all time, and someone else was like, no, this is the greatest anti-war movie of all time.
Yes.
I definitely saw that. It reminded me, actually,
I see both sides. I agree with both of them. I agree with both in many ways. I do.
Yeah. I was actually, have you seen Grave of the Fireflies?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll talk about it later because I don't want to derail, but I saw some connections there.
Yeah.
But I was also going to ask, especially with this scene that we were just talking about, have you read or heard of The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien?
No, I haven't.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, like, it's my favorite war book of all time, but I would also say it's the greatest anti-war book. But there's a scene where, like, the whole basis of this book by Tim O'Brien is him trying to argue that reality, in the sense of what happened and what didn't happen, is less relevant than your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because reality doesn't really, like, it doesn't exist on its own. Like, reality it has to be filtered through a person. And so your experience is just as true as what actually happened, if you're the only one to witness it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So he has this one chapter in his book, and the book very much illuminates the atrocities of war. And he has this chapter where all of the soldiers have, like, taken over a village in Vietnam, and they have destroyed all these things, and they get their hands on a baby water buffalo. And they start like kind of poking at it, and then it just escalates until they're like keeping the water buffalo alive, but taking pieces off of it and like shooting it in like non-lethal places. And it just gets like really intense and really nasty until the thing finally dies. But he talks about how like they just get so into it. They're like salivating because their adrenaline is just so intense and their feelings are so intense, and the pain that they're feeling because of the pain that they've caused is like all compounded. And then the chapter ends with, but maybe it wasn't a baby water buffalo. And then you're like, whoa, like what? Ah! And so like he was trying to describe like where that kind of bloodlust gets you. And so like that scene with you know, he's got the pistol and then he's got the knife, and then he's just like, what the heck just happened? Like, what am I? You know, it's just so beyond comprehension. It reminded me of that, and how like this other author was trying to convey the same thing, where like you can get so lost in violence that you can lose yourself.
Yeah, I that's really, really good. That you just look at it in comparison to sort of a movie like Braveheart, you know, which is all sort of about sort of these downtrodden people like standing up to the big guy, and you know, we will never surrender our freedom, you know, and then you get the battle, and it's very triumphant and very exciting, and it's a good movie. But it's just so different here, where it's like, I don't know, like, where there's just no aggrandizing about it at all, really. I don't think at all. And it's a very like wow, this is where this has come, you know, this is what and I think maybe partly because it's all just sort of started on this sort of tenuous alliance, and it's really so you don't have this sort of like scenes of sort of the downtrodden Arabs, and you don't have sort of the bad guy. It's just everything about it is sort of more subtle.
Yes, I agree. And I think it was interesting because I read somebody say online that the battle scenes in this were toned down. I didn't actually really agree with that. Like, I think that they're edited in a way that you're not getting like a ton right in your face, but I think that we have this idea of war, or even just violence, as this like big spectacle, you know, where it's like every time a car rolls, it'll blow up, you know, 5 times, you know, it's like a Michael Bay film, you know, and it's like, you know, if we imagine someone being shot and dying, we imagine it very, very graphically, because that's romanticism.
Yeah.
But the thing is like, someone gets shot, they just bleed.
Yeah.
Stuff isn't, hang on. Yes, you can have some. You know, stuff isn't making a fireworks show. And so in that sense, I thought that this video very much represented some of the grunginess of the whole process. I
mean, it doesn't give you anybody to necessarily cheer for, and it's just I don't know, it's just better than that. It's just I feel like I'm not explaining it that well, but yeah.
We're both just like, yeah.
I don't think it needs. I think that if it had been more brutal, that would have made it a lot less effective. It would have made you think less. It would have just shocked you with imagery, and there is some shocking imagery, but just enough to not kind of to just enough to kind of get you thinking, but not enough to kind of traumatize you to stop you from thinking. Right. Okay. So next I have is once they get to Damascus, the Arabs set up a council, but can't agree on anything, even keeping the utilities on. And so, what does this say about the difference of governing and leading soldiers between the two, and why is Lawrence so ineffective here? And you know, it's sort of interesting too that Ada tells Sharif he is not yet a politician because he loves Lawrence too much. So that's sort of why do you think that he's just so ineffective in leading this council, Lawrence?
I I think, like, to everything there is a season, and you don't usually have great warriors and great political leaders in the same person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they do. I think they entail very different things. And it's so silly of me to compare like this very epic true story to like fantasy, but I'm more versed in fantasy in a lot of ways. But like, have you ever read or heard of Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson?
I've heard of Brandon Sanderson. I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, so like, I mean, the first book is all these people, and like, I guess spoilers, like mild spoilers. I don't know. If you read the backs of the books, this is already there. But like, they spend the entire first book trying to defeat this evil Lord Ruler, and it works. And then the second and third book are all just them dealing with the fallout, because it takes so much to actually establish any kind of order. And I mean, and that's one of the great questions of mankind is like, can you achieve peace through violent means, you know? And so it's like, here they are, you know, they're like, fight. Here's all our violent means. And then they're like, now we need order and peace.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, I don't know.
Well, I think an interesting comparison in history is to look at like Ulysses S. Grant. You know, I mean, he was a tremendous general. He's in the Civil War, but he wasn't really a very good president. And you know, it's just a different set of skills. And you just think like we had earlier the quote about politicians being about talking about saying things without saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Lawrence is very good at that. I don't think that he is the kind of person that can kind of I think he's somebody who's going to say what he thinks. And you know, he really does love these people, and I think that that's actually sort of hard as a politician. You kind of have to have a certain amount of
detachment.
Detachment, or you're going to fall for every sob story that comes your way. And so you kind of do become, he's cynical, but he's not cynical in the right way for a politician.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know, so they are just completely they were able to make things work as sort of a survival tactic, but now you're going more into sort of everyday kind of living sort of tactics with utilities and stuff like that. That it's just a totally different sort of mindset that these people just can't work together when it comes to everyday things, but they can survive together.
Yeah.
So Lawrence laughs at the men in the hospital, the Turks, the prisoners of war, basically. Is he just gone crazy? Is he insane at this point? Or what did you think of that scene?
I don't know. What did you think?
I think he has kind of lost it a little bit. Like, I think he's just kind of, I don't know. I think he's just mentally sort of broke. I don't know.
I'd have to agree. I mean, like, I really, like, I already said it, but I really do think this was like a really good movie about PTSD. Like, his descent was just really incredible. Like, you get to go along for the whole ride. And so by that time, I think sometimes there's no way to make sense of anything. Like, you can laugh or you can cry.
Yeah, that's true. And I think he's just so like exhausted by everything that he just, I don't know, just can't deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's another, I'm sure the more I watch that scene, the more sort of insight I'll have into it.
Right.
But on a first watch, I did kind of feel like he's lost it. Okay, next, my last sort of plot question is, Prince Faisal says, young men make wars, and the virtues of war are the virtues of young men. Courage and hope for the future. Then old men make peace.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree? And it's sort of interesting to think of courage and hope being a virtue of war. Which I don't think of hope as being I thought that was really an interesting quote. What do you think?
I thought it was brilliant. I loved it. So I mean, to take on the first part, I do think that hope is part of war, because like, you wouldn't fight if you didn't think that no one was going to survive it and be able to enjoy the fruits of your labors. And like, oh, there was this line. Oh yeah. Oh, it was so good. Oh, it's so good. Where I think it was Sharif Ali. I can't remember, or maybe it was Prince Faisal. One of them said it. I think it was. Anyway, he said, "Do you?" He was pretty much like, and I'm gonna butcher this completely, but he was like, "Do you think we like living in the desert? Because we don't." He's like, "We like green things. We like gardens," and he was like, "Someday we're gonna have gardens again." And he was like, "But that day is not today. And before we can have gardens, we must first have this war. There must first be violence." And so I think that's what they're referring to when they're saying like the virtue of war is courage and hope. It's hope that this is going to amount to something, and that you're giving your life. Not even if you don't die, you're giving your life. In the sense that like you will never see the fruits of your labors, and you know it. And I'm not like a fan or of anything of war by any means, but just interpreting that line, I think is where they're going with it. And I thought that was really interesting. But then when they said, the old men make peace, and what's the line? Not the flaws of peace, but the vices.
I didn't write down the whole quote, but that sounds right.
Because he uses both. So it was like, what did he use for? What was the first part of it?
Young men make wars, and virtues of war are the virtues of young men. Courage and hope for the future. Then old men make the peace.
Yeah. So there was another part to it where he says the virtues of war are the virtues of young men, but then he says, but also the vices of war are the vices of young men. And then he says that the virtues of peace are the virtues of old men, and the vices of peace are the vices of old men, which I thought.
Let's see here. Okay, yeah, there's just a little bit longer. Sorry, okay. I should have written down the whole thing, I guess. It says, "There's nothing further here for a warrior. We drive bargains, old men's work. Young men make wars, and the virtues of war are the virtues of young men. Courage and hope for the future. Then old men make the peace, and the vices of peace are the vices of old men.
There we go.
Mistrust and caution, it must be so." It's really interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think I never really thought about it quite that way, that, with courage and hope being a vice of war. I don't know, that was just very, very, something I've been pondering, I guess, about, that, because you think of hope as being such a positive thing, but in this, and I guess war can be, it sounds weird to say, but war can be positive. I mean, we get rid of despots, we get rid of, and it can provide many moments of inspiration, but, they, sort of like, I feel like kind of like Lawrence at this point is tired, and, he's given all that he can give, and that's sort of, I guess that's sort of an old man. Even though he's not technically old, he is kind of an old man. And so, yes, you want sort of peace and mistrust and caution, which is very, very interesting to think.
Yeah, because I can see how like they're having such a hard time getting this organization done. Like the only thing they're going to be able to do is compromise. Mm-hmm. And you're going to lose a lot of what you fought for in the first place when you compromise. Mm-hmm.
I just saw another quote here, which is really, because this is the beginning, I think, of the movie. He says, "With Major Lawrence, mercy is as a passion. With me, it is merely good manners. You may judge which motive is more reliable."
What? They got some great lines in this movie.
And so I think by the end, it's not as much a passion for him, that he has just become kind of a realist. It's sort of like when you're young, you think that we can solve all of life's problems. That's why younger people tend to be more, more interested in things like socialism and stuff like that. The older you get, you tend to kind of grow out of that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a quote about that? Doesn't it say like, if you're not a patriot in your youth, then you have no heart, and if you're not a pacifist in your old age, then you have no head, something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect example.
Yeah, I probably butchered that quote as well, but that's what it's going for. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I think that is accurate.
And I think that that with there's just a certain you almost forget what you're fighting for, I guess, by the end of some conflicts, and I think that Lawrence kind of had, and the movie doesn't really give us like this great reason for the conflict. You do get like I said, it's not like we see sort of this villain or this, horrible people that are treating people these horrible ways, and so I don't know. It's just sort of more about these individual characters and how and their journeys to kind of at the end of the movie. It's just a really interesting. There's no like great injustice really that starts the conflict, at least. Okay, so yeah, the next question I have is, what did you think of the acting? We talked a little bit about it. Peter O'Toole, Anthony Quinn, Omar Sharif. Just in general, let's talk a little. We haven't talked that much about Peter O'Toole, but what did you think about him? This was his first role. Holy cow. How on earth? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, he reminded me a lot of like Charlton Heston from like Planet of the Apes and the Ten Commandments. I thought it was amazing. I loved the acting. I saw, as I was like studying up on everything, I saw some people mention like, oh, the acting's not great. Like, it's actually really terrible and wooden. And it's like, wait. What was considered good acting in the 1970s is not the same thing that is considered good acting today. Like, what people valued in their actors on screen is not the same. So I feel like it's good, and to this day I think it's still good, but any of those like differences, any of that stuff that feels really like wooden or melodramatic even, or whatever, like I really feel like it's more a product of its time and what it was that actors acted like.
I didn't feel that way, honestly, at all. I didn't feel that it was. I mean, I think he's much better than Charlton Heston. I do. I like Charlton Heston. We'll talk about him when we watch Ben-Hur. But I think he's way more subtle, way more interesting. There's way more going on behind. I mean, his eyes are just the blue eyes. Like it actually helps a lot in kind of adding to the character. I think the script helps him a lot too, because it's just so good. And but I don't know. He's just. There's just so much in his face, and you see him just sort of change, and you're always just sort of wondering, like, what's going on? Like, is he happy? Is he enjoying this? Is he not enjoying this? Is he scared? Is he not scared? Is he, like, there's, I didn't think that he was sort of a bombastic classic Hollywood actor like you get in a Charlton Heston or something like that. I compare it honestly to like similar to Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird. I know that seems totally different, but
no, I got you.
Just in the way there was so much going on beyond it seems like it's just sort of a simple sort of performance, but there's so much going on beyond the eyes.
Well, and I think I might have misrepresented that too, because I didn't feel like he was wooden or melodramatic. That was me responding to like people online who were saying like, this is why I think the acting is bad, because it comes across to them as wooden or melodramatic. And I actually disagreed.
Yeah, I totally.
Yeah. Because I agree, like he is very emotive. And I think that is one of the most valuable things that any actor can do, is convey depth of character through expression.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you're describing, where it's like, there's so much going on behind his eyes. It's kind of like like one of my favorite depth of character through expression is on Ever After with Drew Barrymore. I feel like she's so good at creating the depth of character. I wish that Drew Barrymore was more like her character.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Marlon Brando was originally offered the role, and Marlon Brando was amazing in his heyday, but I can't imagine him doing this part.
No.
No. He
No.
would have been way more over the top and way more campy, and I don't think that this is campy at all.
No.
And so he's a Shakespearean trained actor. He studied at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, and he's just one of those British actors that just incredible.
I think he got it. I think he just tuned in.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because I was reading online and it was saying that some of his family members, especially particularly his brother, saw the movie, and this family member said, I should not have been able to recognize T.E. Lawrence, but I did. And it's like, I think he tapped in.
Interesting. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think that Peter O'Toole ever won an Academy Award. He was nominated. He was nominated many times. Yeah, he holds the record for the most Academy Award nominations without a win. He was nominated, 8. He was nominated 8 times, and he never won, which is just. He did get an honorary award. I think they were finally like, okay, here you go. You should have won. I am curious. I want to see what. I wonder what movie. I wonder what actor won over him.
Right, probably someone we'd never heard of.
Yeah, let's see. This will be interesting. Gregory Peck, To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, I can go with that. Gregory Peck.
That's funny. It's kind of like how like The Wizard of Oz didn't get like any awards the year it came out because it came out the same year as Gone with the Wind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah.
It's a great year. This year, in this, they had Lawrence of Arabia, The Longest Day, which I don't know. I don't know that movie. The Music Man, which I love. Mutiny on the Bounty, and To Kill a Mockingbird and then The Miracle Worker also came out that year, which I love. So there you go. All right. So, The Manchurian Candidate as well. That's another good movie. It was a good year. Okay. Next up is the brown face in actors like Alec Guinness as Prince Faisal. Is that offensive?
I feel like this kind of goes along with some of the stuff I was saying earlier, how like the short answer for me is yes, but I give it a big old caveat, which is I think that they were just really ignorant at the time. Like it was something they thought was really normal, and like today, like I did not go see like Gods of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
I boycott a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I never end up regretting boycotting it by any means. Because I do feel like Hollywood at this point is almost trying to make a counter statement where they're like, we're going to do this and we're going to get away with it and you're going to like it. You know, they're so desperate to prove themselves right that I feel it's a very aggressive thing that affects a lot of marginalized communities.
Yeah.
But with Alec Guinness, I think that was a missed opportunity.
Right.
Because I think Omar Sharif is so good in it. That like his acting career extended, over decades in Hollywood movies. For all you know, you could have had another Omar Sharif, but they chose not to. They chose somebody that they, thought could carry the role. I thought Prince Faisal was good, but I didn't think he was great. I did feel like I was watching Obi-Wan Kenobi the entire time.
Yeah, poor Alec Guinness. He's this Shakespearean trained actor, and he's remembered for a space movie. But excuse me. It is a creature of its time. I don't give it a complete pass, but it doesn't really stop me from the movie, I guess. That's how I have to say about it. But yeah, Gods of Egypt is probably the best comedy of 2016. It was hilarious. If you want to see a So Bad It's Good movie, it's really funny. Okay, so the film evidently makes Lawrence more of an egotist than he actually was. Same with some of the elements of the Arab Revolt are not portrayed accurately. Do these historical inaccuracies bother you? No, me either. It's a movie. You have to make it. You have to make it a good movie.
Like I said
in my Pocahontas review, I only bothered by historical inaccuracies on bad movies.
I actually thought
then it bothers me.
I thought of that when you were talking about that. And the thing is too is like, I feel like one of the most important things that you can keep accurate, and this kind of goes along with that Tim O'Brien book that I enjoy so much.
You have to check that out.
Yeah. Oh, it's horrible and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Inaccuracies. Where am I going with this?
Yeah, historical inaccuracies.
I started thinking about Tim O'Brien. I think like the most important thing that you're capturing here is it's an emotion, it's an experience. And if you can capture the emotion and the experience, I do feel like it's okay to move a lot of this stuff around. And a lot of things happen the way they happen because of happenstance too. Like for instance, I was reading online and one of the inaccurate scenes was when Sharif Ali shoots the guy at the well. That apparently never happened. But what I was reading online was that's generally considered a good indication of the kind of things that did happen, because people did have life and death feuds over wells, and they did have laws like that, and that was something that could have happened. So with that, it's like, I think that's great because you're capturing you're capturing the emotion and the culture and everything that you wanted to. It's totally within the parameters of reality. And one of the articles I read said the most unrealistic thing that could not have happened was the quicksand.
Interesting.
They were like that. Yeah, they said that like in order to have quicksand like that, you have to have standing water. And they were like, that's not going to happen on the side of a dune. So they were like, that's ridiculous. So.
Oh, interesting. I would never have known that one. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Apparently go ahead.
I was just saying, I don't think that any of the historical inaccuracies kind of created caricatures. That's where it becomes kind of awkward. Is when you have like the greedy, English guy, and you have the perfect in Native American in Pocahontas. Sort of creating these caricatures. So I think it bothers you a lot more when you feel like it's becoming preachy or it's becoming becoming silly. So
that's all.
I don't think it's a problem.
Yeah, I do think like I do feel like there was a sense of caricature over just the entire Arab culture presented.
Really?
I do.
Okay. I didn't think it was too bad.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. It's not too bad and not even distracting, and it doesn't ruin the movie. Just in terms of like what Orientalism is, like in short, Orientalism is attributing like exotic, seductive, irrational, essentially feminine traits onto an Eastern culture, and then presenting the West as rational, moral, and male. And I do feel like there are some things there where like he comes in and it's like, y'all won't stop fighting, like if you don't stop fighting amongst yourselves, like you're never gonna win. And it's like a little heavy-handed there, Europe, but
interesting.
So yeah, I think that there's some places where you can see that coming through, and
but I think sometimes Abu is more, or Ada is more manly than Lawrence, as far as, I don't know, like he's just sort of more of the traditional masculine kind of a thing. But yes. I can see what you're saying. There are some of those scenes, but I think it's pretty subtle. They do a pretty good job.
Yes, and I do think that you're right, that Lawrence is more complex than that. And I think that that comes from the fact that they did base it off of a real person, and a real person is going to be more complex than those stereotypes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's keep going. My next question is, does the film justify nearly 4-hour length, or do you think it should have been trimmed?
I think it absolutely justifies its time. I do.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why, it kind of goes back to that Miyazaki thing.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy Lord of the Rings, but I think that I enjoy it for some different reasons than a lot of people do. I think that a lot of people are like, oh, you can see Tolkien's experience with war in the battle over Isengard, and oh, this battle over here represents the Somme, and they like try to like set up an allegory when he never wanted there to be. But what I feel really conveyed his experience with war was how he understood what it meant to wait. Because from what I hear and what I read, a lot of war is drudgery, and it's waiting. It's, you know, dying of trench foot before anything else. And sorry, I'm pulling in another like fantasy example, but it ties, I promise. But like in Lord of the Rings, there is this part where they're going through the swamps, and the worst part about the swamps is not in the movies. In the books, the worst part about the swamps are the midges. And it goes into detail on how like every single day these like midges are like in their ears and like in their nose and in their pants, and it's like they're just getting bit by midges all the time. And it's like stuff like that some people are like, oh, you could take that out of Lord of the Rings, you'd have the same book. But it's like, well, no, there's a sense of experience here that you're not going to get from any other author. No one else is going to think to talk about the midges. No one else is going to think to talk about how calming it is to watch the snow evaporate as it hits the fire at night. No. And that's the kind of thing that I'm like acting like I've got some sort of display behind me. Like that's the sort of thing that this movie does, where it's like, it shows, for instance, so many times him just like going across the desert on a camel.
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel like that was so good. Like it pulled you into his world, where it's like, oh, again, we're going to go across the desert on a camel. And just how like sometimes you just sit on your camel and you just space out, because it's going to be days before you get to where you're going. Like I thought that was, you can't do that without taking the time. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if I was going to say maybe, I think maybe a little bit of the first hour could have been cut a little bit. Like I wasn't sold on the movie for the first hour, and I was like, oh, come on, let's get the story kind of going. But then it totally won me over. But I don't know, now in retrospect, I'm like, oh, what would I cut? I don't know. But that would be my only, maybe you could cut 15 minutes or 10 minutes, maybe a little bit in that first hour. That would be my only thing. But okay. Is the cinematography by F.A. Young better than other epics such as Ten Commandments and Ben-Hur?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh.
No doubt. I think it's, I think it's some of the best cinematography, and it totally holds up, because some of those other epics, Cleopatra, some of those other kind of movies, Spartacus, things like that, they're really great. I mean, the chariot scene in Ben-Hur, we'll talk about that coming up, but totally holds up and is incredible. And but I feel like you can still tell that these are sets. These are, and you never, there's really not hardly any sets, in this movie. I mean, it's that you've got these incredible buildings where the colonels are, but you never get the feeling of like, oh, we're on a soundstage.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I did have to look up like partway through the movie. I was like, where was this filmed? And it said like Jordan and somewhere else. I can't remember what the other one was, but yeah. But just there was even one shot I remember appreciating a lot. Like some of them are really epic and beautiful and all that, but there were some times when like the camera would like pan down to their shoes and just like hang out there. And I was like, that's really interesting, because it kind of reminded me like, yeah, sometimes when you are talking to somebody and the conversation goes on for a while, like you just look at their shoes. And then I was thinking of, there was another one, yeah, where the perspective of the camera goes to the sand, like as they're riding on a camel, and you just see like the camel's one shadow. And I was like, because that's what you totally look at. Like if you're riding on a camel for hours, you're just going to be like watching the camel's shadow like move across the sand. I was like, this is I'm like still looking at it.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
in my mind's eye. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, just incredible. And the way, yeah, it's not just epic kind of shots. Like I love the scene where they're releasing all of the horses from the train.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, that scene was so good. And I don't know, they're just, and like I said, I also just think that's the scene with him with that bloody knife was just so perfect.
Yeah. And I did feel too that there were like shots where I was like, I feel like I recognize that shot from another movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you could tell that this definitely inspired other people.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna talk about that next. There's only 2 more questions, but Lawrence of Arabia is quite possibly the most influential film ever made, with George Lucas, Stanley Kubrick, Ridley Scott, Steven Spielberg, to name a few. That they're named it as their favorite. Spielberg called it a miracle of a film. And it's Steven Spielberg's favorite movie, and so can you see its influence in other films? And I'll answer this one. Absolutely. I mean, just Star Wars alone, for example. I mean, just the way that Tatooine, is sort of shot, and you get the sort of desert kind of feel. You look at the way that it kind of creates, the way it kind of builds up its characters, the way that I don't know, just it's so many different levels you can look at different films that you can see that were influenced by Lawrence of Arabia. The acting, the writing, the yeah.
And I would bet you $20 Miyazaki saw Lawrence of Arabia, because I'm not calling him unoriginal by any means, but just like I really felt like there were some strong ties there.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of Miyazaki, but yeah, absolutely, definitely. I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's so many movies where I can look back and be like, yep, that was inspired by Omar Sharif's performance, or that was inspired by Peter O'Toole, or that was inspired by that scene, or that dialogue, or that. There's just I agree.
For sure. And he's barking like a chicken over there.
There you go.
Sure what's happening. It just distracted me. What was I gonna say? Similarities. Yeah, I feel like it influenced people in like so many different ways. Like you could see how, for instance, like this totally, I am just gonna guess what like really made that white savior trope take off. And the imitations are never stronger than the original.
Yeah.
But I also felt like, I saw it just even in some shots. I was like, I feel like I've seen this shot before. And anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's also cool too to me that I don't feel like it's ever truly been completely copied, but which I think says kind of how good it really is. It almost feels like one of those untouchables that's just too.
I hope so.
I don't know. Yeah, and like
nothing is sacred anymore, but
yeah, I think they'd have to find some really hack director, because I certainly don't think any of these respectful directors would ever touch it in a million years. But I don't know, that just says something to me that like I can't say that I can't think of a movie where I'm like, this is this year's Lawrence of Arabia, like I can't. So
I think they've definitely tried. Like as I was watching it, I felt like the Four Feathers.
I haven't seen that.
You're gonna crack up, because it's like trying to be Lawrence of Arabia. The storyline is very different, but I would say that there was not a moment in that movie that did not feel like it was trying to imitate what was accomplished here. it falls totally flat and it centers on a romance. But I think that The Four Feathers with Heath Ledger was actually already a remake, though. But I still feel like it was definitely somebody who wanted to tell a very similar story.
Well, there certainly have been similar stories, but never one, I don't know, that I feel like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of those movies I can feel like, oh, they're really more trying to copy Hollywood epics more than, I don't know, I just feel like there hasn't been anything that really feels like, wow, they're really tapping into Lawrence of Arabia in a real like copying kind of, like, there's definitely homages paid, there's definitely scenes that are similar, it's definitely an influential film, but I don't know, I just think it says something about the quality of the movie that it's never quite been even attempted to really be duplicated as a whole. Anyway, all right, last question I have is about the music. There were times when the movie would get really quiet, and then there were times when it would really sort of telegraph, like, boom, this is a big moment, boom. And I thought it did it right. I thought it really worked. But I don't know, what did you think? Did you think the sound design and the music, did that work for you? And there wasn't like an obvious theme like you would get with a John Williams movie or something where there's this like theme of Lawrence of Arabia. It was more just sort of, it kind of reminded me a little bit of a Hans Zimmer score that you get today, where he has sort of, he's famous for the da-da-da, da-da-da, you know, kind of a thing. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of that, you know, but in like a really good way. Like, I didn't feel like it was overbearing, but I felt like it was used very effectively.
Yeah, I agree. For me, I kept trying to pay attention to the music, but then it would like fall into the background, which is what I think a soundtrack is really supposed to do. The majority of the time. There are exceptions to that, but I think too, it never felt like it was relying on the music for the drama. Like I loved the Lord of the Rings movies. They are some of my favorite movies of all time. But I do think that there are a couple times there where it's like they just show like a landscape or like a building and they're like bum, 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 and they're like creating the mood for you, you know? And it's like what you're seeing on the screen is not going to evoke this same emotion. And so it's a little, I mean, well, calling it a shortcut's a little rich because, I mean, creating great music is hard to do. But I felt like Lawrence of Arabia, I honestly think you could probably watch the whole thing without music and you would still feel incredibly invested in what you were seeing because I don't feel like they relied on the music that much.
Because it uses its music very selectively. It uses it very effectively. It did win Best Original Score. I would have, honestly, I do think the Elmer Bernstein score for To Kill a Mockingbird is better, but they're really both excellent. Very, very good. So, all right. Well, that was my last question. Did you have anything else that you wanted to bring up about the film?
I think we covered it. I did think it was really interesting that my son, so he's 5, and he like wanted to watch it with me. He was like, hey, this looks cool. Like, what is this movie? And I was like, oh, this is Lawrence of Arabia. And he's like, what? Like, is that a camel? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, wow. And then like, it caused all this discussion where he was like, do the camels get thirsty? Like, they're all drinking water. The camels not drinking water. And I was like, well, camels can drink as much as like a swimming pool or whatever. I'm not really sure. That's a mom fact for you. But like, he was totally interested. And I thought it was easy to watch with him because obviously there are some violent and intense moments. And I would just take the camera and turn it. Sorry, not camera, the screen. And I am talking to my friend right now. Okay. What do you need?
Lindsay sleep?
Yes, she's sleeping. Okay.
Sorry. You're fine.
So I would just turn the screen and, you know, just kind of like make sure whatever was happening, you know, went away. And then he's like, I just turned it back and it was fine. He didn't watch the whole thing, but he did watch a surprising amount. I'd say this kid probably watched like 2.5 hours of Lawrence of Arabia.
That's not half bad. It really isn't.
So,
for a 5-year-old, pretty good, so, pretty impressive.
And I don't think it's just him. Like, I really think that like what they had happening on the screen was very compelling and just So I was surprised by that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's a movie that I think can be appreciated on so many different levels. I think it can be enjoyed on so many different levels, and it's not one that leaves you feeling, for all the tough stuff that's in there. It's not one that leaves you feeling depressed or manipulated, like similar films can do. It leaves you feeling like you had a great experience, a great experience at the movies.
Yeah.
Kind of feeling like, wow, this is what it's all about. So.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say the way that it reminded me of Grave of the Fireflies,
Yeah.
which was like Grave of the Fireflies. It starts out the same way with like, the character's going to die, because the opening of Grave of the Fireflies is the kids' ghosts essentially on the train. And the kid dies in the station. And I also thought that it was similar in the sense that it's technically about the war, but whether you're able to follow like what's happening with the war or not, it's really kind of irrelevant, because the story is so myopic. It's like the camera is just so focused on just one person's very unique experience. And it was really similar in the sense that like you saw a lot of characters just sitting and staring and processing, and the day-to-day challenges of being involved in something like that. Obviously they're not the same movie, but I thought that it was so fascinating. It was just super fascinating to me that the setup was so similar, and then the focus was somewhat similar. So yeah, that's reminded me
definitely. That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that, but yeah, I could see that comparison, and really like sort of the way that movie kind of takes the characters on sort of an emotional journey, where they go from being more optimistic, I guess, to being more cynical, kind of, and I don't know. Yeah. Oh, that movie's so good. So good. Okay. Well, so next week we will be talking about Sound of Music, which will be quite a different tone, but it'll be wonderful. One of my all-time favorites. I'm very excited to talk about that. But where can people find you?
So they can find me on Twitter at MRSCTYLER, Mrs. C. Tyler. And on YouTube at C. Tyler Vision. So youtube.com/C. Tyler Vision.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I have that in the description section. And thank you so much for doing this. It's a tall order to ask somebody to watch a 4-hour movie and be ready to talk about it, but I really appreciate it.
Totally. I enjoyed every minute.
All right.